So good morning once again, everyone. Welcome to Disaster Readiness and Risk Reduction. We are already at our 14th week, and for 14th week, our topic is a continuation about our 13th week topic, which is exposure and vulnerability. So once again, this slideshow presentation was prepared by Sir Jamuel Anthony Garcia. So for this week, for 14th week, we will explain the structural vulnerabilities of physical structures with respect to different hazards and also identify elements exposed and vulnerable to a specific hazard. So let's proceed to our discussion. We have again physical vulnerability. These are one of the types of vulnerability. So physical vulnerability may be determined by aspects such as population density levels, remoteness of a settlement, the site, the design, and materials used for critical infrastructure. So, example again, wooden homes. They are less likely to collapse in an earthquake but more vulnerable to fire. The term physical vulnerability, which has been used in many disciplines and different contexts, defines the probability or the potential of a given physical component or element to be affected or damaged under a certain external excitation. Sorry, excuse me. Examples given is a natural hazard such as an earthquake. So, uh, let's identify the exposed elements. So elements exposed to shaking hazard. So for example, we have earthquake. So the house itself, people living inside the house, family, pets, furniture, belongings, personal records, sentimental value, possessions. And also we have prevention, mitigation, and adaptation strategies. So what are these? So secure to a nearby wall or large tall appliances or pieces of furniture that may move around or topple over during a strong earthquake. Ang next naman na strategy is move any large or tall appliances away from where it may fall on people, uh, or block an exit way during a strong earthquake. Next naman is secure all lighting fixtures suspended the ceiling or hanging from the which may fall on people or pets. And also secure breakable objects on shelf. So normally using Velcro. So alam niyo naman yung Velcro, yung parang masakit siya yung pag tumama sa balat, yung parang yung tunog niya, ganon. So, sorry. And the last one is put ties on cabinets that may suddenly open during an earthquake as well. So that is our strategies pag we have a shaking hazard. So let's identify some more hazards and the electrical fire and extreme heat and combustion. So the hazard that we have is the exposed element. We have uh, Christmas lights. So dahil malapit na magpasko, alam naman natin na hindi kumpleto ang sa ibang tahanan, kaugalian na nila ang maglagay ng Christmas lights, especially sa Christmas tree. So, paano natin ma-prevent ang electrical fire? So, regular maintain Christmas lights and check for any exposed wires that may cause a short circuit. Not using Christmas lights on the Christmas tree as well. And for mitigation, buy only Christmas lights with ICC or PS certification, hindi yung tag 20-20 lang. Kasi yan talaga yung mga pinagmumulan ng sunog. And use a timer on outlet to turn Christmas lights off. Also for adaptation, do not overload electrical socket and do not leave Christmas lights on for an extended period of time as well. For extreme heat and combustion, any nearby furniture or objects that are combustible, so such as people, house and contents, and so on and so forth. So, ito yung mga exposed elements for Christmas light. Also, use Christmas tree and ornaments made from non-combustible material and locate Christmas tree away from combustible furniture and objects as well. And in order for you to avoid it, also at maagapan, install a fire alarm as well and regularly maintain fire alarm so that it is working properly, and place a fire extinguisher near the Christmas tree or the Christmas lights. For adaptation, locate the Christmas tree outside the house instead inside the house. So, para mas less yung hazards, just in case pagmulan nga ng sunog tong mga Christmas lights, mas maigi pa na sa labas na lang siyang ilagay. So that is for our electrical fire hazard. Now this is for identifying exposed elements. So for identifying specific vulnerabilities. So we have here the hazard is an earthquake or a strong ground shaking. So what are the exposed elements? We have the house, the contents, and the occupants. So, sorry, excuse me. For our exposed element, which is the house, so put the house on stilts will make it shake more during an earthquake, resulting in a larger earthquake forces acting on a house. For the contents, because of the stronger shaking, there is a greater chance that the contents of the house will be thrown around inside the house or get destroyed. And for the occupants, putting the house on stilts will make it more difficult to evacuate during a strong earthquake. It is particularly true for the children, the person with disabilities, or the elderly occupant of the house. Because of the stronger shaking, there is a greater chance that the contents of the house will be thrown around and will injure the occupants of the house. So this is for identifying specific vulnerabilities for the hazard of earthquake or strong ground shaking. Another hazard that we have is fire, flood, and typhoon. And the exposed elements, once again, is the house, contents, and occupants. So for fire, putting the house on stilts results in reduced accessibility by firefighters. For the contents, putting the house on stilts will make it more difficult to evacuate the contents of the house during a fire, making them more vulnerable as well. And the occupants putting the house on stilts make the house more difficult to evacuate during a fire as well. For flood naman, the house will not be reached by flood waters because of its higher elevation. And then dahil nga mas malaki yung mas nasa higher elevation siya, hindi siya ma-reach ng flood, and then yung contents sa loob will not be damaged. For the occupants, because the house is likely to be reached by flood water, there is likely a chance that the contents occupants will be affected by flood water. So for typhoon, putting the house on stilts make it more vulnerable to strong winds and typhoons because the higher from the ground, the greater are the wind forces. In particular, there is a greater possibility for the roof to be blown off because of the higher elevation and open windows. And also there is a great possibility for the contents of the roof being blown off during a typhoon results in great possibility that the contents will be affected by a typhoon as well. And for the occupants, the greater possibility of the roof being blown off during a typhoon results in a greater possibility that the occupants will be affected by a typhoon. So that is for our week 14. For your references, kindly look at your handouts or PDF files. We also have two activities for week 14. We have activity 1 and activity 2. So once again, this slideshow presentation was prepared by Sir Jamal Anthony Garcia. So before ending this week 14 lesson, I would like to share a video, short video regarding about exposure and vulnerability.
For today's video, we're going to discuss vulnerabilities of different elements exposed to specific hazards. Basically, at the end of this lesson, you'll be able to realize that recognizing the vulnerabilities will help your community design to formulate strategies, programs on prevention, mitigation, and immediate response in case disasters may happen. Well, recall muna natin ang vulnerability. In everyday life, you are using this word, vulnerable. But do you really understand the meaning of this? Vulnerability is a degree of susceptibility and resilience of community and environment to hazard. This is the inability to withstand the effects of a hazard. Kumbaga, mataas ang chance mo na maapektuhan ka sa isang bagay. You're prone. So for example, senior citizens are vulnerable to COVID-19. So what it means? Ibig sabihin ay mas prone ba ang mga senior citizens? Why are they prone? Because of their characteristics. So the factor of vulnerability is the word susceptibility and resilience. When we say susceptible, it means easily influenced or harmed by something. Mabilis ka bang apektuhan? Madali ka bang kapitan ng sakit? So that is susceptible. Second is the word resilience. Resilience, it is your capacity to recover quickly from the difficulties. How quickly can we recover? What is our capacity of recovering? Then that is our resilience. Now, let's identify the vulnerabilities of different elements that are determined due to its exposure to particular and specific hazard. Number 1 is physical vulnerability. When something is physical, it's really there. You can see it, touch it, taste it, hear it, or even smell it. For physical vulnerability, it includes population density levels, place of settlement, the site design, materials used for infrastructure and housing. Ano ba yung tinatawag na population density? Let's say, sa isang 100 square meter na lupa, so meron tayong family A na mayroong 10 members of the family. While sa family B, meron naman silang 20 members. So dito masasabi natin na family B is more dense than family A. So given tayo ng isang area wherein nagkakaiba sila sa number of population. So that is population density. One of the example of physical vulnerabilities is when UP Visayas buildings were totally destroyed during the Super Typhoon Yolanda. That was in 2008, leaving the structure totally damaged. Another example is the decrease in population density, like what happened in Baguio during the 1990 earthquake in North Luzon, when a lot of people were injured and died. Second is social vulnerability, which refers to the potential negative effects on communities. It happens due to inability of people, organization, and societies to prevent severe effects from hazards because of the expected behavior in social interactions, institutions, and system of cultural values. So for example, during typhoon, the line of communications were cut off when cell sites shut down, or disruption of transport system due to inability of small vehicles to pass through the flooded areas or unpassable roads and bridges. With some difficulties in the delivery of services such as relief goods and medicines, a lot of problems occurred, like shortage of food and spread of infectious diseases. Therefore, when social elements were exposed to hazard, this may lead to disruption of normal processes and activities in the community. And I want to tell you that the level of economic vulnerability is based on the economic status of individuals, communities, and nations. The poorer the country, the more vulnerable to disasters. The most affected are those who belong to low income, and informal workers. The environmental vulnerability that is caused by natural resources depletion and destruction. So yung mga human activities like deforestation, burning of fossil fuels, and yung pagkakain. It affects the natural abilities of the environment na maprotektahan ang sarili nila kapag may natural hazard na mangyayari. Vulnerability can be expressed as 0, which is the lowest degree of vulnerability, and 1 if it is the highest. Vulnerability of people is the ratio of casualties or injured to the total population, wherein the vulnerability of buildings is expressed as a repair cost or degree of damage.
So, that is for our week 14 once again. Exposure and vulnerability. So thank you, Sir Jamal, for this presentation. And thank you once again. We'll see you all, everyone. We'll see you again on week 15.